Dragon Age Origins was rated M for mature by the ESRB and contains blood, intense violence, language, partial nudity, and sexual content. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello everyone, my name is Amaronith and I play games for the internet, and today we're playing Dragon Age Origins. It's time for another Codex reading now that we've secured the aid of the dwarves. We will begin with Article 3, Archdemon. In darkness eternal they searched for those who had goaded them on, until at last they found their prize, their god, their betrayer, the sleeping dragon Dumat. Their taint twisted even the false god, and the Whisperer awoke at last in pain and horror, and led them to wreak havoc upon all the nations of the world. The First Blight. Threnades, 8-7. The false dragon gods of the Tevinter Imperium lie buried deep within the earth, where they have been imprisoned since the Maker cast them down. No one knows what it is that drives the Darkspawn in their relentless search for the sleeping old gods. Perhaps it is instincts, as moths will fly into torch flames. Perhaps it is some remnant desire for vengeance upon the ones who goaded the Magisters to assault heaven. Whatever the reason, when Darkspawn find one of these ancient dragons, it is immediately afflicted by the taint. It awakens, twisted and corrupted, and leads the Darkspawn in a full-scale invasion of the land. A blight. Orzammar was once the Tevinter god of beauty. In ancient times he was worshipped by musicians, artists, and poets. The Feast of Orzammar was the grandest celebration of the year, an event that lasted a full 12 days. Plays and entire symphonies were written in his honor. Now he is a maddened husk of his former self, filled with nothing but a desire to destroy all life. Article 7. Broodmother. It is well known that Darkspawn carry off those captured in their raids to underground lairs. Most assume that the prisoners are eaten or somehow tainted and turned into Darkspawn themselves, though this could never account for the sheer numbers of the horde. Forays made by Grey Wardens into the underground have uncovered the answer. When exposed to the Darkspawn taint, men are driven mad and eventually die. Women, however, undergo great pain and gross mutations that cause most of them to perish. Those that survive, however, become the grotesque broodmothers. These giant twisted behemoths birth many Darkspawn at a time. A single broodmother can create thousands of Darkspawns over the course of her lifetime. Each type of Darkspawn is born from a different broodmother. Humans produce Herlocks, dwarves produce Genlocks, elves give birth to Shrieks, and from Kunari are born the ogres. Huh. Oh. That answers a question. Sorry. Article 9. Deepstalker. A fool trusts his eyes. A wise man fears every rock is a Deepstalker. A Dwarven saying. Possibly the strangest of all the creatures found in the deep roads is the Deepstalker. Tezpadam, as the dwarves call them, hunt in packs, generally by burrowing underground and then striking when their prey is in their midst. Stalkers come in several types. Spitters have venom glands and can spit secretions that slow or injure their prey. Jumpers hurl themselves at their targets, knocking them down and making the kill easier. The most common variety scares its prey, leaving the unfortunate victim helpless against the rest of the pack. Article 18. Nug. Hip-deep in mad nugs, our screams deafen their keen ears. We will be nug poop. From Songs That Only Nugs Can Hear by Paragon Ebrian, 584 Exalted. The nug is an omnivore common to the deep roads, a hairless creature that is almost blind as well as completely docile. It spends most of its time wading in shallow pools as well as mud pits, feeding on small insects, worms, and, in a pinch, limestone and simple metals. Indeed, the digestive system of the Nug is legendary, able to make a meal out of almost anything a Nug finds on the cavern floors. Nugs reproduce rapidly, spreading into any niche within the deep roads they can find, and serve to support a variety of predators such as giant spiders and deepstalkers. So, too, do dwarves make meals out of them. Nugs are, in the poorer slum portions of Orzammar, one of the most common sources of meat available. Some dwarves even domesticate the creatures, claiming to find the creatures' high-pitched squeaks pleasing. Article 59. Mythal, the Great Protector. Elgernon had defeated his father the sun, and all was covered in darkness. Pleased with himself, Elgernon sought to console his mother, the earth, by replacing all that the sun had destroyed. But the earth knew that without the sun nothing could grow. She whispered to Elgernon this truth, and pleaded with him to release his father. But Elgernon's pride was great, and his vengeance was terrible, and he refused. It was at this moment that Mythal walked out of the sea of the earth's tears and onto the land. She placed her hand on Elgernon's brow, and at her touch he grew calm, and knew that his anger had led him astray. Humbled, Elgernon went to the place where the sun was buried and spoke to him. Elgernon said he would release the sun if the sun promised to be gentle, and to return to the earth each night. The sun, feeling remorse at what he had done, agreed. And so the sun rose again in the sky, and shone his golden light upon the earth. Elgernon and Mythal, with the help of the earth and the sun, brought back to life all the wondrous things that the sun had destroyed. And they grew and thrived, and that night, when the sun had gone to sleep, Mythal gathered the glowing earth around his bed, and formed it into a sphere to be placed in the sky, a pale reflection of the sun's true glory. From The Tale of Mythal's Touch, as told by Gisharel, keeper of the Ralafaring clan of the Dalish elves. Article 134. The Casteless. The caste system in Orzammar includes many groups of privilege, the nobility and the warriors above all others, but to a lesser degree the merchants and the smiths and the miners. Tradition establishes a clear hierarchy, but as in any culture with an upper class, there is also a clear underclass. These unfortunates, the so-called casteless, are believed to be the descendants of criminals and other undesirables. They have been looked down upon since Orzammar's foundation. They have taken up residence in a place called Dust Town, a crumbling ruin on the fringe of Orzammar's common areas. Orzammar society considers these casteless lower than even the servant caste. Indeed, the casteless are not allowed to become servants, as it is too honorable a position. They are seen as little better than animals, their faces branded at birth to mark them as the bastard children of the kingdom. Their home district, little more than a slum, is a haven for crime, organized and otherwise. Orzammar's guards seemingly cannot be bothered to patrol its streets. The best that most casteless dwarves can hope for is a life at the whim of a local crime lord, ended abruptly by violence or an overabundance of toxic lichen ale. Even so, there is some hope for the casteless, a dangling rope that offers a way up into greater Orzammar society. Since a dwarf's caste is determined by the parent of the same sex, the male child of a nobleman is part of that noble's house and caste. Strangely, it is acceptable for casteless women to train in the arts of courtly romance to woo nobles and warriors. They are known as noble hunters. Any male born from such a union is considered a joyous event, considering the low rate of dwarven fertility. The mother and entire family are then taken in by the father's house, although they retain their caste. The dwarves we know on the surface are also considered casteless once they leave Orzammar, although this is only relevant to those who return, if they are allowed to return at all. Dwarves who leave for the surface are the sun-touched, as they're often called behind their backs, lose their connection to the stone in the favor of the ancestors, and thus are worthy of little more than pity, for upon dying they are said to be lost to the stone forever. Put that way, it seems a sad existence indeed. From Stone Halls of the Dwarves by Brother Jenna TV, Chantry Scholar. Article 135. The Castes. Visitors to Orzammar should keep in mind that the hierarchies of Dwarven society are much more complex than our own. It is easy to gravely insult a man simply by mistaking his position. Since this can lead to unnecessary loss of life and limbs, I will attempt to mitigate the danger for my fellow travelers. The society of Orzammar is divided into nobles, warriors, smiths, artisans, miners, merchants, and servants. Now you are undoubtedly saying to yourself, we have all those divisions among our own people. This is a dangerous misconception. Certainly we do have a nobility, artisans, merchants, and these positions are largely inherited from our parents. However, the younger children of noblemen often choose to be artisans or soldiers. The sons of merchants may join the army or become servants or apprentice themselves to a craftsman. These are all freely chosen, limited perhaps by the circumstances of birth, but still chosen. What is a matter of choice for most human folk is dictated entirely by birth for dwarves. No one may become a smith who is not born to smith caste parents. A servant who marries a noblewoman will never be a noble himself, and although his daughters will be nobles, his sons would be servants, for daughters inherit the caste of their mother, while sons inherit the caste of their father. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar, by Brother Jenna TV. Article 137. The Deep Roads. There isn't a dwarf alive who remembers the deep roads as they once were. There were the network of tunnels that joined the Tighes together. To be honest, it isn't even right to give them such a simple term as tunnels. They are works of art with centuries of planning demonstrated in the geometry of their walls, with the statues of the Paragons that watch over travelers, with the flow of lava that keeps the deep roads lit and warm. The cloud gazers up on the surface talk of the imperial highway built by the magisters of old, a raised walkway that crossed thousands of miles, something that could only have been built by magic. Perhaps it is comparable to the deep roads, although we dwarves didn't need magic. I suppose it doesn't matter anymore. The Darkspawn rule the deep roads now. When Orzammar sealed off the entrances to the deep roads, abandoning everything that lay out there, we handed over the kingdom that was to those black bastards forever. To think that there are genlocks crawling over Bonamar now, tearing down our statues and defiling our greatest works. Corruption covers everything we built out there. Every dwarf who goes out and comes back says it gets worse with each passing year. The foulness spread a little further. And the cloud gazers think the Darkspawn are gone just because they aren't spilling out onto the surface? Huh. One day, when Orzammar is gone for good, they'll find out differently. Those Darkspawn won't have anywhere else to go, and they'll do it. The surface folks will have themselves a blight that will never end. Transcript of a conversation with a member of the Dwarven mining caste. 890 blessed. Article 138. The City of Orzammar. The dwarves are lauded for their craftsmanship, and the City of Orzammar is one of their finest works. Orzammar lies at the heart of the Frostback Mountains, deep underground. The city arcs outward from the royal palace, which is built around a natural lava vent continually fountaining liquid rock, which both lights and heats the entire cavern. The topmost tier of Orzammar is home to the noble caste, with their palaces fanning out in both directions from the court of the king, as well as the Shaperate, which serves as a repository for all dwarven knowledge. The lower tier is the commons, where the merchant caste holds sway and where the finest works of Orzammar's craftsmen are for sale. In the center of the river of lava, connected to the commons by a causeway, are the proving grounds, a sacred arena where the dwarves by ancient tradition settle their disputes. On one side of the fiery river are the ruins of old dwarven palaces, fallen into disrepair, which the locals call Dust Town, now home to the city's Casteless. On the other side of the river are the Deep Roads, which once joined the sprawling Dwarven Empire together, but now, after centuries of darkspawn incursions, are largely sealed off. Nearly all knowledge of this network of underground passages has been lost, even to its builders. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genetivi. Article 139. Cut to Kal Sharok. 1155 of the Devinter Imperium will be known as a year of painful decisions, but we cannot waver. The threat we face is the greatest we have known. If we are overrun, all trace of the ancestors' glory will be undone. Orzammar must stand, and it must stand alone. Hormak, Kal Sharok, Gundar, we have lost contact and must assume they are lost to the Horde. We must seal the weakest link in our defense, the deep roads that lead to our fallen brethren. I have ordered our finest demolitionists to place the charges. I ask that each of you think of those we have lost. They served as a warning that spurred us to action, and I know the stone will embrace them. They are the foundation of our survival, and they will not be forgotten. From the Proclamations by High King Threestone. 200 years! Kal Sharok lives, you stone-forsaken deep lords. There is no greater hatred than a brother at your throat. Graffiti. Author unknown. Article 140. Legion of the Dead. Yes, Stone's greeting friend, you will fight ceaselessly in the Legion of the Dead. Motto of the Legion of the Dead. The Legion accepts all. Or so I was told by one of the Legionnaires himself. A dwarf who had waited quietly at the entrance to the Deep Roads for the rest of his unit to assemble. They gathered slowly, each equipped with heavy armor and fine weapons, each painted with grim tattoos applied at their funerals the nights previous. For that is the nature of the Legion. They are all dead. Any dwarf may join the Legion, so long as he is willing to give up everything he has. The funeral rites are somber. A final goodbye is said to family and loved ones. Any material goods are dispersed to heirs and last words are said. And then it is done. The new Legionnaire marches out into the Deep Roads, never to return. The Legion fights against the Darkspawn to the last, striking one final blow against the monsters that have claimed so much of their homeland. Many join the Legion to clear the slate. Criminals join to avoid punishment. The dishonored join so that their houses and families need not suffer on their behalf. The bankrupted join so their debts might be forgiven. Very few join for a last chance at glory, but the Legion takes them too. This group hopes to reach the fabled fortress of Orzammar, once the Legion's home, associated with the greatest of their Paragons. Orzammar is a holy place. It's lost the last great blow against the Dwarven kingdoms, and its recapture would be a glorious signal to all of Orzammar. But capture it or no, all of these warriors will die in the Deep Roads. It is a sombering thought, and now I know why the dwarves say the Legion's charge is the battlefield's most frightening sight. They have nothing left to lose. From Stone Halls of the Dwarves by Brother Genetivi, Chantry Scholar. Article 141. House Aeducan, Shield of Orzammar. The Assembly has never named a Paragon with so little disagreement as there was for Paragon Aeducan. No naysayers, only a single abstention. His worthiness was unquestionable, his favor with the ancestors clear, but family rumor says that the man himself was deeply troubled, prone to fits of melancholy and self-doubt, never satisfied with his great achievement in protecting Orzammar. He died cursing that he had not managed to save the outlying taigs. Before he rose to Paragon, he was of little note. The memories tell us that he never entered a single proving, never sought to elevate his place among the warrior caste. He spent most of his years prior to the first Blights fighting skirmishes in the Deep Roads, keeping them free from surface bandits, content to live quietly with his wife and daughters. When the Blight began, it caught Orzammar in the midst of a vicious inter-house war. Most of the warrior caste was caught up in the feuding, for as word of attacks poured in, each great house demanded that the army be sent to defend their taig, and no house would agree to sacrifice their own holdings for the safety of any others. The assembly was so utterly tied up with the infighting that the darkspawn was spread, unchecked, to the gates of Orzammar herself. In the chaos, Aeducan grudgingly took command of the armies. He enlisted the aid of the mining caste to collapse overrun passages, called upon the smith caste to supply them with arms, and bypassed the assembly and the nobles entirely. With his leadership, Orzammar was saved from annihilation. For his insubordination, he was made Paragon. Yet he always considered it a defeat. From A History of Aeducan, Paragon, King, Peacemaker, by scholar Gertek. Article 142. The Paragons. As I studied among the dwarves, I became aware that their social system was as rigid as the stone that surrounded them. From the lowest servant to the king of Orzammar, each dwarf had a caste, a rigid social standing, which dictates what he may do and how he may do it. What fascinated me then was that the dwarves, stubborn and proud as they may be, have built in a way for even the lowliest dwarf to bypass the caste system and reach prominence. Any dwarf who has made an achievement of significance can be named Paragon, elevating that dwarf above all others. To become a Paragon is to be recognized as essentially a living ancestor. Your words are considered ineffable, and the dwarves liken you unto a god. Your family, those you choose to ascend with you, become the founders of a new line of nobility. Indeed, every existing noble house among the dwarves traces its line back to a founding Paragon. It's a rare thing, however. In my visit, I learned that only one Paragon had been elected in generations, the smith Branca, exalted for her discovery of smokeless coal. I met the Paragon Branca only once during my stay, and I consider it an odd occasion. Indeed. Surrounded by those of her house, this ill-tempered woman was draped in the finest clothing and jewelry, and was obviously revered even above the highest nobles, perhaps even above the king. Yet she seemed to enjoy none of it. The burdens of being a living legend is great, it appears. Statues of the Paragons are found throughout Orzammar, though nowhere so prominently as than in the Hall of Heroes, through which one passes on entering from the surface. It is a breathtaking sight to behold, great works of stone all seeming to hold up the ceiling above. It is meant to impress upon visitors to Orzammar, who have gone before, I think. It is also meant to remind dwarves going to the surface, and thus abandoning their brethren forever, of all that they are leaving behind. From Stone Halls of the Dwarves, by Brother Genetivi, Chantry Scholar. Article 143. Orzammar Politics. As dangerous as it is to mistake a dwarf's caste, it is far more deadly to mistake his alliances among the noble houses of Orzammar. Everyone in the city is allied with someone, whether by blood or by word. The nobles do not engage directly in commerce themselves, as that is the domain of the merchant caste, but they do serve as patrons. They invest in shops or in artisans' work, and in turn reap a share of the profits as well as a measure of the credit. Merchants and warriors alike benefit from the service of a prestigious patron. The relative power of each house is ever-changing. It is usually safe to assume that whichever noble house holds the throne is at the top of the heap, but below that things grow into a tangled mess. Houses ally with one another by marriage. They earn rank and prestige when combatants loyal to them or from their own bloodlines win provings. They earn it when artisans they patronize become sought after or well regarded, or when the merchants they invest in become successful. The degrees of power that these achievements confer is so murky even to the dwarves that it isn't unusual for nobles to challenge each other to provings over whose smith forges better belt buckles, or whose servants have the best manners. Nor is it out of the ordinary to find two merchants arguing over whose noble patron has won the most acclaim, for the rank of the patron is the rank of the client. Nowhere is this more apparent than in the assembly, where the Deshers, representatives of each noble house, meet. Although the king technically rules Orzammar, kings are elected by the assembly, and so each king must work constantly to maintain the support of the Deshers. Kings who prove unpopular find their heirs deemed unacceptable to inherit the throne. Power then passes to another house. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar, by Brother Genetivi. Article 144. The Proving. Valos Atredum. In the 23rd year of the reign of King Bhelen Aeducan, an old man of the servants' caste was accused of stealing a sapphire ring from his employer, Lord Dace. The servant was stripped of his position, and he and his family thrown to the streets, and soon after the servant died. The son of the disgraced servant challenged Lord Dace to a proving, declaring that his father had been the victim of a cruel injustice, and the ancestors would bear him witness. Lord Dace had no choice but to accept. On the sacred stone of the proving ground, the nobleman faced the servant boy. Lord Dace carried a sword crafted for his own hand and was clad in his great-grandfather's armor. The servant boy had neither armor nor weapon. When the battle began, the boy fought like a whole pack of angry Deepstalkers, flinging himself upon the startled lord, wrenching the sword from his hand and prying at his armor with bare fingers. The boy knocked Lord Dace to the ground and beat him until the lord begged for mercy. The boy and his family were reinstated to their place in the Dace household, and the virtue of the boy's father was not questioned again. The ancestors had spoken, and no one would question their word. As told by Shaper Vortog. Dwarven Faith. Article 145. Dwarven Faith. The chant of light is almost never heard in the halls of Orzammar. This is hardly surprising, for unlike the elves who were literally abandoned by their gods, or the Tevinters who worship dragons, the dwarves have no gods at all. Even the concept of worship is foreign in Orzammar. Instead, the dwarves seem to venerate the stone, a name they give to the earth itself. This seems practical for a people living underground, if a bit unimaginative. For guidance in spiritual matters, they turn to their ancestors. These ancestors, who are said to have returned to the stone, communicate their wishes to the living via brutal trials by combat called provings. The ancestors' collective wisdom is maintained by the Shaperate, which can apparently store records in Lyrium itself. Set above the ancestors, above even kings, are the Paragons, dwarves who have achieved such greatness that they are elevated to almost godhood. These are the great figures holding up the hallway that leads from the surface, the first glimpse of Orzammar that outsiders see. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar, by Brother Genitivi. Stalata Negat. I keep doing this, I'm sorry. Article 146. Stalata Negat. 913 Dragon. The Blight is building, though it is years from being named by the surface, but the memories know the signs. The Legion has lost Bonamar, though in truth it was lost to the living long ago. The spawn are moving freely and have numbers even the memories haven't seen. They will surge. Release. We will fortify and follow. That is the way. That is, and will always be so, until we fall and the surface wonders what had changed. From Chapter 49 of Stalata Negat, The Stone Unheld, a commentary on the Roll of Years by Shaper Caridin. 7-0 Storm. The wars continue in the depths and the border tigers are lost. Orzammar fortifies and holds, but the lost ground is not regained and remains dead space, where darkspawn multiply. It was a surge, but the surface was not breached. There was no great archdemon behind them. No blight was declared, no rallying cry was given. The wardens slumbered. After centuries of constant skirmishes, a trend becomes clear. The first line of defense, unacknowledged for centuries, weakens. From Chapter 40 of Stalata Negat, The Stone Unheld, a commentary on the rolls of years by Shaper Caridin. 512 Exalted. The surface declares the fourth blight, a number that means nothing to the stone. In the depths, the events are inverted, our blight spanning the interim years, 7 generations of shifting lines and darkness. Our ancestors are the reason the surface kingdoms don't know a darkspawn by sight, why even their eldest have never heard and counting firsthand. They believe the blights are defeated by a gathering of allies with a singular focus. Eventually they will be lost by attrition in the depths. The spawn surges and releases. We fortify and follow, although doubts are raised. From Chapter 27 of Stalata Negat, The Stone Unheld, a commentary on the Roll of Years, by Shaper Caridin. 310 Towers. They name it a blight, the third by their reckoning. It was just the fight to our ancestors, continued even though it shifts setting. The hordes that press their border surge and release, spilling across the surface. They fortify and follow. It was not their way to let the enemy rest. 325 Towers. The surface kingdoms declare victory. The horde is crushed, the push halted, and celebrations began as humans thank the skies and their maker. Beneath their gaze and their feet, the Darkspawn retreat to the steppes of our Tigers. New front lines are drawn across old. They settle in to breed, the memories say, as happened twice before, and likely in the darkness before that. From chapters 14 and 17 of Stalata Negat, The Stone Unheld, a commentary on the Roll of Years by Shaper Caridin. Article 147, Orzammar History, Chapter 1. The memories tell us that our kingdoms once reached far beneath the mountains, and that the Tigers were almost beyond counting. Kal Sharok was the capital then, home to all the noble houses, and Orzammar simply the home of the miner and smith castes. It was with the Tevinter Imperium that things changed. Paragon Pyral moved the seat of power to Orzammar to more closely oversee the trade that began with the surface. It seemed that our people were entering a new age of prosperity. The memories held no exception for the coming of the Darkspawn, only questions. No explanation for the coming of the Darkspawn, only questions. At first they were rumors, noises in the deep roads, a lost traveler here and there. The warrior caste sent men to patrol the road and thought the matter settled. We did not know that while we searched for them, they were engaged in a search of their own. Sleeping deep in the zone itself was the Archdemon. They found him and awakened him, and the blight began. The Darkspawn poured out of the deep roads like smoke, and the warrior caste struggled to hold them back. Countless Tigers were lost in that first blight, but as ever in the worst moments of our need, a Paragon rose. Bhelen Aeducan led the defenses of Orzammar, and the dark horde was beaten back. The cost of victory, however, was great. Much of the deep roads were sealed to hold back the Darkspawn, cutting off Tigers and even whole cities forever. Orzammar as a kingdom, as told by Shaper Zybor. Article 148, Orzammar History, Chapter 2. We were losing the war against the Darkspawn, slowly. A few men at a time, but losing all the same. The warrior caste was dwindling with each generation as more able-bodied men perished in their prime without fathering sons. With each generation, more of the deep road had to be sealed, more Tigers lost forever. The kings of Orzammar watched and wondered how long it would be until nothing remained of our people but the memories. And then Paragon Caridin arose from the smith caste with a new weapon, golems. Giant soldiers of living stone and metal, each one was an army. With the Paragon's golems, we began to retake the lands we had lost. For a while there was hope that final victory was coming. But at the height of the war, Paragon Caridin disappeared, and with him the means to make golems. Several forays were made into the deep roads to search for the Paragon, but nothing was ever found. Over time, the golems we had were damaged beyond repair, and we began our slide once again towards extinction. Orzammar as a kingdom, as told by Shaper Zybor. Article 161, The Blights. My dear Anika, I would not worry about the assembly. Let the nobles sit together and argue over whose house owns the grandest Tig. It keeps them from panicking, which they would surely do otherwise, and prevents them from making a greater nuisance of themselves. War is the business of warriors. I would say that the enemy's strategy seems to be changing, but they never appeared to have a strategy before, beyond destroying everything in their path. For weeks their numbers appeared to be dwindling. There was talk that perhaps we were getting close to wiping them out. We could not have been more wrong. For today we came upon the body of their main force. I cannot give words to it, Anika. I have never before seen so much death in one place. There were darkspawn beyond counting, and at the heart of the throng a great beast, as tall as the palace of Orzammar, with breath of fire. A paragon of darkspawn, perhaps, for they seemed to pay it deference. They were leaving, marching towards the mine shaft which led to the surface, but I knew when I beheld them that once they have devoured what lies above us, they will be back. From the letters of Paragon Aeducan. Article 164. Bhelen Aeducan. This is a time for action, not cultured debate. Third of King Endrin's children, Bhelen has always been considered the last and least of his family. Not the heir, nor the favorite, not as accomplished as either sibling. Bhelen's most notable trait was his ability to stay out of trouble. His efforts were for nothing, though. The assembly named Pyral Harromont King of Orzammar, and the coup he tried to stage in revenge was cut down almost before it began. Article 171. King Endrin Aeducan. Denial of the traditions of our people does not qualify as a political technicality. Endrin of House Aeducan traces his ancestry back to the Paragon Aeducan, the greatest warrior of Orzammar's history, who beat back the Darkspawn hordes in the first Blight. The second son of King Ansgar Aeducan, he became heir after his elder brother died in approving. The most respected king in 4 generations, he restored contact with Kal Sharok, the only other remaining city of the once vast Dwarven Empire, which had been lost during the first Blight. Article 175. Lord Pyral Harromont. No one is born with the rights to the throne. The sitting king may recommend a successor, but the assembly ultimately decides who will rule. House Harromont is one of the oldest noble houses, as old as Orzammar itself. Endrin's most trusted advisor, Harromont, is well known for being an able administrator, and the author of many compromises in the ever-warring assembly. His promise to King Endrin to keep Bhelen off the throne was upheld by the intervention of one Paragon and the Grey Warden Faria. Harromont was named king by the assembly, ending the internal strife in Orzammar. Article 182. Oghren. I'm not saying I should be your first pick for a dance partner at the inaugural ball, but in the deep roads I'm your man. Oghren of House Kondrat was once a promising member of the warrior caste. His house was not especially high-ranked, but many of its members, Oghren included, had won notable victories in the provings and were considered to be rising in prestige. When a Smith caste family with plenty of money but no political connections offered their daughter in marriage, his family accepted the match, and then everything changed. His wife, Branca, was named a paragon for her achievements. All of House Kondrat joined her newly made noble house Branca, and vanished with her into the deep roads. As time passed, it became more and more clear that Oghren had been abandoned. He became the butt of jokes throughout Orzammar. He took to drink, which didn't especially help. Drunk and humiliated, he challenged another warrior to a proving over an insult and killed him. The match was meant to be fought to first blood. As punishment, he was stripped of his house and barred from bearing arms, the only fate worse for a warrior than exile. The Grey Warden Faria mounted a search for Branca and found her and the Anvil of the Void, for which she had led her house to their deaths. Oghren enjoys challenging his palate with alcohols of ever-increasing rarity, potency, and outright lethality. This has afforded him no benefit whatsoever. Article 183. Shale. What can I say? I have a heart of stone. The golems of Orzammar once made up the vanguard of the Dwarven army, holding back the tides of darkspawn that flooded out of the deep roads, but the art of making them was lost, and many of them succumbed to wear and damage in battle. Shale has no memories of either time spent fighting in the deep roads or of coming to Honleith, only a few spotty and bitter recollections of its last master. Faria unearthed Shale's control rod and awakened it, adding a bitter, malfunctioning golem to the menagerie of companions. 300 years earlier, she had been Shale of the House Kadash, warrior of King Valtor, and a volunteer who chose to dedicate her life for all time to the defense of Orzammar. Article 200, Caridin's Journal. 940, 45th day, 5th year of the reign of King Valtor. I have done it. The vision the ancestors gave me has come to fruition. Today a man sat up from my forge, a man of living stone and steel. I called him Golem, for the legend of those great statues animated by the dead. They are our future and our salvation. And our salvation. 940, 60th day, 5th year of the reign of King Valtor. It is a horrific process. Not every man could do such a thing and survive with his mind intact. I am honored that the ancestors believe I have the strength to bear this burden and forge Orzammar's defenders. Nothing so great may be achieved without sacrifice, nor may stone and steel walk without a spirit to animate them. 940, 73rd day, 5th year of the reign of King Valtor. I have asked for volunteers. Some few answered, men of the warrior caste, younger sons with no property, no chance for marriage. They want to defend Orzammar from the horrors these humans have unleashed. They want to live forever in a body stronger than the finest armor. They do not ask to speak with those who have gone before. I have put off saying this even in these pages, but I must say it now. My golems will be powered by their deaths. These brave warriors come to me naked as they were born. I dress them in a skin of armor so large it makes the burliest look no more than a babe, the anvil their first and final cradle. We are surrounded by a mile of earth on all sides. No one hears the screams as I pour molten lyrium through the eye holes, the mouth, every joint and chink in the armor. They silence quickly, but the smell lingers, just a trace of blood and the greater stench of hot metal. I must work fast. The armor is malleable now, as I shape it with hammer and tongs. It is not long before it moves beneath my hands, writhing and twisting with every blow. It speaks again now, a low moan, but I have learned to tune it out. I can afford no error in this craft. There can be no melted slag blinding the eyes, nor an unhewn bit of granite shackling the leg. They groan at my work, but would they rather be broken, crippled? Those I have spoken to tell me of the pain, but could they see themselves, they would see perfection. From the Journal of Caridin. Article 216, The Legion of Steel. Paragon Caridin vanished in the 11th year of the reign of King Valtor, and with the Paragon the entire process for golem manufacture was lost. Expeditions were sent into the deep roads to track him, but the Darkspawn drove them all back. Finally, in the 2nd year of the reign of Queen Getha, 126 golems, the entire Legion of Steel, were sent to recover the Paragon. None returned. The Shaper of Golems refused to support any further attempts to find Caridin, and the Paragon was officially declared dead. The Shaper had never recovered from the loss of an entire legion of golems, and never again allowed an all-golem regiment into the deep roads. From Stone Halls of the Dwarves by Brother Genetivi, Chantry Scholar. Article 219, In Praise of the Humble Nug. I once served a human some nug, and he proclaimed that it was like eating an unholy union of pork and hare. The idea disturbed him so much that he declined to finish his serving, and made himself content with some stale bread. Of course, this only goes to show that surfacers, human or otherwise, have tragically unrefined palates. The nug is surely the most delicious animal I have ever tasted. Only a dead man would not salivate at the thought of a tender morsel of roast nug melting in his mouth. The Paragon Varen, although his house has fallen, shall always be remembered for discovering the wonders of nug flesh. Admittedly, it was discovered only out of desperation when he was separated from his legion and lost in the deep roads for a week, but we won't hold that against the good Paragon. While nug pancakes and my own children love these, are the Nug dishes one encounters most often. Nug can be prepared in other interesting and elegant ways. The late King Ansgar Aeducan adored Nug, seared on a hot metal plate and finished in the oven, and dressed in a cream sauce flavored with deep mushrooms. You must be careful when using the mushrooms from the deep roads, because they often grow close to darkspawn bodies. They say that this is what gives them their unique flavor and intoxicating scent, but it also means that consuming too many of them may result in curious afflictions of the mind. From In Praise of the Humble Nug by Bragan Tolban, Honored Chef to House Aeducan. Article 220. Traditional Dwarven Folk Songs. Meh. Nug sits in the bug, Nug wiggles his ears, you catch the Nug, he slips away, Nug gets to live another day. Nug sits in the mug, Nug wiggles his toes, you hook the Nug, he slips away, now the Nug runs off to play. Nug sits in the mud, Nug wiggles his nose, you tickle the Nug, he laughs away, now the Nug sits on my plate. Nug Pancakes, a well-loved dwarven nursery rhyme. Well, that's all for now. I hope you'll join me next time. And until then, bye-bye.